we educating the voter so that the voter does not ask for bribe. Where I come from, I don't know how many of you come from Nyamira, the voters call Ogosera. Ogosera means you give them money to want to pay the power mill to be able to grant their maize. You know, give us some money, that kind of thing. Now, there's an idea here that we, the elite, can educate, or should educate the voter. We are all right, with us we are all right. The problem is the voter is not educated. This is what I heard. Now, I want to propose to you that I think there's a building which fell in Kiambu, and it fell down. The guys, if you see, if you go down this, there will be an inquiry, but if you check the people who made a mistake, professional mistake in that building, there will be professionals like me, not an educated voter. Yeah, to be a professional.
Thank you.
If you looked at the contract which was signed for SGR, that contract, I don't know how many people have looked at it, but you can get it from my friend Omutata and go through it. All the padding on that contract, if you can remove the mess and remove the contract, the padding on both sides from the Chinese side and the padding from the Kenyan side, which escalated the price, were done by professionals on both sides. Highly qualified professionals. Now, I'm wondering, those professionals, when they got that money as a bribe, and went, I saw one MP here, took that money to go and bribe the voters, where the voters were the one uneducated, or the professionals who got that money from the SGR and carried to go and give the voter. So whom do you want to educate?
Thank you.
Finally, so basically we are talking about educating ourselves. How do we create a system which educates us to be responsible citizens? That is the issue, not educating the voter. Let me tell you very quickly, I have watched elections since 1963. I've taken part in all the elections myself, all of them. And each one of them, which I've watched with my eyes, has been rigged, including 202. But I hear people saying, oh, all the elections have been very good other than 202. I can tell you, after 202, after Kibaki won, and he was elected, in Nakuru town where I live, within a week, there were 40,000 people killed. You remember? In Nakuru? That January, but it was because of elections. Manyara was arrested, was put in because of elections. So when I hear that there's one election in Kenya where there was no rigging, 202, it's a fallacy. It has never happened. Even the last one was still rigged. Even the next one is going to be rigged because we have begun rigging it in advance.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Let me leave it there. Maybe I can answer some questions, but I just wanted to expand the word to Utu slightly outside the Kenyan context.
Any questions, and I know you do, because I do. We've just received a very good history class on where we've come from, the history of I was born after Kenya became Kenya.
In Homa Bay County, what we have been doing so far for some last years is to do more analysis on the gains in which the counties have made since promulgation of the Constitution on the progressive realization of the Article 43 of the Constitution, that is the ECOSO. A lot has been said today, including fallacy of the choirs in at the Bomas of Kenya, and now the professionals now are somewhere. And I'm also writing a will so that we shall not have some choirs in my funeral. I hear that is a problem. Now, let's go for the hope. For the hope now. And it's a very simple question. Do UTU as a framework can it support the aspirations of the Kenyans as exposed in the preamble and Article 43 of the Constitution? Yes, it can support. And I'll automatically take you or refer you to Article 19.1 of the Constitution. And for those people in governance, I think with the Constitution, you have crammed it. It states clearly that the Bill of Rights is an integral part of the Kenya's democratic state and is the framework of the social and economic and cultural policies. So we are seeing a structure which already is within the Constitution, and if you go to the Article 20, sub-Article 5, it sets out a overall basis in which organs or the CSOs can interpret the progressive relation of the Article 43 of the Constitution or the Article 40 of the rights. Now, if you proceed in those articles, if you go to Article 20, sub-Article 5, it provides a room, and it says that in applying any right under Article 43, if the state claims that it does not have the resources to implement that right, a court or tribunal or any authority can apply the principles in Article 20, go with the CRE. The CRE that is the committed, the recognizing, and the exercising. You'll find in the committed, it says clearly that we as Kenyans, we sometimes say is a prayer, which as Kenyans, the framework is very interesting. It takes the human being as the driver and the human rights as the engine. Very, very much interesting. What does it mean then? We have now to define clearly what is the process of the framework, what is the role of the framework, and what are the goals of the framework. And in expanding this one, we should give a proper definition of this framework so that it can be sustained. But in this case, for the sustainable of the human rights, we are looking at the guiding principles that entails all programs that are within the Article 43 of the Constitution should contribute to the that are within the Article 43 of the Constitution should contribute to the realization of the human rights. That is the only way out. And the human rights standards should guide programming process in all the process, and that programming should contribute to the development of the capacities of both the right claim, the right holder and the duty bearer. Now, clearly the development goal of this framework, if it can be defined well, then is to contribute or further the realization of the human rights or the aspirations. The development process is to ensure that the human rights principles and guide the development process of each and everything. And this is where we have been having problem in more so when we are talking about progressive realization of the Article 43 of the Constitution. What is the meaning of the progressive realization of this Article 43 of the Constitution? So it means that the development process is to ensure that human rights principles guide all development and all the program process. Another question which might be asked, do the UTU framework, do we have the linkage between the UTU framework and the National Development Agenda? Currently, as you know, we have the Big Four agenda. The Big Four agenda is very interesting. It is talking about the 100% universal health coverage, 500,000 affordable new homes, food, nutrition, and also to increase manufacturing to the GDP from 9.2% to 20%. This means that the realization of these aspirations needs a lot of reforms. And if you look at it very well, the Big Four agenda contributes to the realization of the Article 43 of the Constitution. And to measure this standard, which has been mentioned in the Constitution, we just group it from the Article 43 of the Constitution to the development agenda of the Kenya and even all the SDGs. For example, in meeting the universal health care or the right to free from hunger, the Article 43 of the Constitution on ECOSO recognizes the right to be free from hunger, while the Big Four agenda addresses through the food security. But you'll find the SDG is talking about the zero hunger. So that's how the framework should balance. And if you go to the issue of the highest attainable standards of health in Article 43, you'll find that the Big Four agenda intend to achieve it through universal health coverage, while the SDGs advocate for good health and well-being. If you go to the issue of accessible and adequate housing, as indicated in the Article 43 of the Constitution, the Big Four agenda will bring it as through affordable housing and manufacturing, while the SDG advocate for the sustainable cities and communities. Now, how do this now framework flows from there? You will find that the framework now starts to analyze who is being left behind, which right is at stake, who has to do something, who do they need to take action from. This is different from what we have been analyzing from the needs, and also from the actual the actual practical thing. Now, what are the roles of the CSOs in strengthening this framework? Our role now should be to sustain the practice of this UTU, to increase usage of the concept of UTU, and to increase the demand by citizens. How? We have now to change our interventions. The focus of interventions have been very much badly as our CSO, because yearly we have been intending to meet the basic needs of the people instead of protecting and fulfilling the rights of the poor and the marginalized. That's the change and shift of the area. Secondly, we have now to work to empower right holders, support to the rights holders, and also to the duty bearers. Now, the drivers change here as CSO, the CSOs should be especially to, for the poor and the marginalized. And this is how the concept of the UTU has been, and more so on the framework. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ojijo. Thank you very much, Ojijo, for contextualizing how we can use UTU to realize our aspirations as envisaged in the Constitution. The next speaker will get slightly more time. Reverend Dr. Linda Ochola. Some 5 minutes have been donated to her by Uraia's chair, Dr. Mwangola. Karibu sana, Dr. Ochola.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. So just check for me for a moment if the person sitting next to you is still awake, and I promise to keep it short. As the first speaker said, this is the graveyard shift in workshops. So let me see. Let me see if we can manage to make it through. And thank you very much, Dr. Waindi and the leadership team at Uraia for the opportunity. So mine is to share briefly on the role of civil society organizations in affirming national values. Now, in terms of national values, I think those have been already alluded to, but just a quick run through, I just picked this up off the net. Some of our values are patriotism, national unity, sharing and devolution of power, rule of law, human dignity, equity, social justice, inclusiveness, good governance, integrity, transparency, accountability, and the list goes on. I want to start by saying this. Governments are not equipped to deal with these issues. Governments are not equipped to deal with the issues of solidarity. Governments deal in law, isn't that right? They deal in law. You're giving me sleepy nods. That's encouraging. At least you're still there. They don't deal with issues of solidarity. Governments don't deal with issues of trust. Governments don't deal with issues of compassion, of caring for one another, of honesty, of integrity, and the virtues of helping others and thinking well of others. And those are the values I want to suggest that we are really talking about when we are speaking about UTU, isn't it? Thinking about people, caring about people, looking out for that person as you would want them to look out for you. And I want to say that in terms of the role of CSOs in affirming national values, that these values and virtues belong firmly in the domain of civil society, because they don't belong in the domain of government. When you're called by the local chief is not coming to offer you compassion. It is kiboko or else. When you're called by the police or you're caught by the long arm of the law, they're not calling you to tell you that they care about you. They are coming to deal with you very differently. And so I'm saying that issues of Utu really belong in the domain of the civil society. The role of the civil society, and let me just give a little definition of that. Civil society is really the voluntary association and organization of life, away from the political and away from state and government control and domination. And so I think that the role of civil society in affirming national values is really that we as civil society have the place to point the way in which we can actually deal with these issues, so-called softer issues of trust, issues of mutual forbearance, and so forth and so forth. Now, in the broadest sense, civil society is actually the area where we live. It's where children grow up. It's where children are trained in the mores, the customs of families, of clans, villages, and neighborhoods. And that identity that we acquire is what is critical to the sense of who we are as human beings and the links and solidarity we have with other neighbors. It was interesting for me to hear you, Dr. Waindi, when you started, because you alluded to how you felt and how you thought Kenyans should feel. That if we are not seriously disturbed, that's what you said, by the stabbings, by the poverty, even when we are sitting in a grand hotel like this, you said something is very wrong with us. But those things that you described are things that we teach children all the time, every day, in families. That's where you first teach people to share. When they want to grab the whole mandazi to the exclusion of all others, that's the place where you teach them that this, whatever is before us, belongs to us all. So in the broadest sense, I would say civil society encompasses that as well. So in terms of the role of civil society, and many of us who are here have started all of these organizations. We are working in all of these organizations because of personal passion, isn't it? Can somebody really pay you to do what you do? And the times when you're dry in between grants, hello, somebody. Can they pay you? And some of you make phone calls and you network long after 5 p.m. because of passion. I can see at least one smile. I think it is me and the gentleman in the yellow shirt. So what is our role in affirming national values? I want to suggest that civil society, our role is the positive things that we teach, not just the negative things that we try to constrain society from doing. It's also the positive things that we can teach, the ability to inspire society to do good. The work of civil society is to be positive and to encourage. And that is something very important that we can do. Now, a little bit about context. We really work, and just to sensitize at this point, you know, we've spoken, I think, about the election situation, and we've been told that all of them have actually been rigged, in point of fact, from the beginning. We work in a context where the politicization, I beg your pardon, of ethnicity and religion complicates and damages relationships. That is where we are functioning. And it damages relationships, it damages the structures of trust that have been built up here in our part of the world. And so what we do as civil society in terms of affirming national values is that we work to ensure that those who are manipulating religion, manipulating ethnicity to their own advantage, that the impact of those kinds of messages and narratives are minimized. And we work to build an acceptance of ethnic pluralism. And we work to ensure that people, articulate these values and that these values guide the way we live our lives together. Let me say something, because I work with Uraia Trust, which is a faith-based organization, and I know that faith-based actors are here as well. I want to say, with regard to Utu, that in a sense, we in this part of the world recognize two sovereignties. We recognize, we here as Africans and as Kenyans, we recognize the political sovereignty, which is the nation state, and we recognize its jurisdiction as, acknowledged in international law. But African culture, the majority of Africans, also recognize another form of sovereignty, which is the divine sovereignty. We recognize the claim that God has on our loyalties, on our allegiance, and on our interdependence as members of the family of faith who live, in one country, sharing responsibilities. And so that is one of the other things that civil society really does. Because for most Africans, divine sovereignty is a reality in our lives, and sometimes even that political sovereignty, though it is there, can seem distant from the people, sometimes even threatening. And so one of the things that we do as civil society and as faith-based actors is to combine our loyalty to God with our duties and our responsibilities as citizens. That is the task that we are working on. We're working on developing this sense of loyalty that people have towards God, the sense of loyalty that they have towards their fellow human beings, and helping them to express that in responsible citizenship. In terms of how we can equip civil society, I think there are a couple of ways. One, of course, is the school curriculum. We had back in the day, I don't know about now, the civics lessons where we taught a lot about this. I think we have civics, we have social studies, we have Christian religious education, we have Islamic religious education, and this is the place where we can be having these sorts of conversations about responsible citizenship in the context of the sovereignty of God. It's not a perfect scenario. I've talked about the politicization of ethnicity. Let me say also that we are living in also the modern economy, which amplifies individualism. It makes us think sometimes that everything we do must be for our own self-interest. And so individualism is very powerful, and it has affected us here on the African continent quite a bit. But it is a relatively modern concept. And I think something that we can tackle as we continue to explore Utu and amplify Utu. Say, as I just finish my brief presentation, that all of these ideals and values are around Utu responsible citizenship. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Reverend Dr. Linda. I think those of us from the civil society have picked quite a few things that relate to the work that we do and the role that we have to play to ensure Utu is firmly enroot or founded in a society. I want to open up the conversation, invite comments, questions to the panelists, additions, clarifications. As I've said, those who would want to hear more about the history of no questions, no comments, no clarifications sought? Or do we start the conversation again, maybe this time? Thank you.
Thank you very much, panel. I'm Suba Churchill. And after listening to Okara is one of our most resourceful people in the Kenya National Interface team. And anytime he speaks, we draw from his wisdom. Now, my question would be, given the brief history about your struggles with the concept of Utu in the 90s, is it then therefore the scarcity of resources that have made Africans lose their humanness? Because from your sharing, you seem to be suggesting that by allowing all these freedom fighters in Zambia, actually, Kenneth Kaunda was practicing Utu, brotherhoodness, solidarity, sharing the limited resources they had to liberate, the idea of freedom for the rest of Africa and so on. So is it scarcity of resources? Is it failure by the older generation to hand over the concept of Utu to the younger generation that was already troubling the young man that you talked about? Because increasingly, when you talk to young people, there is this acquisitive instinct that seems to have taken the better side of their preoccupation at the expense of workmanship. Because in Africa, we used to say, I am because we are. And that for me is at the heart and the root of Utu. There was that solidarity. When people had famine in African societies, they would go to look for those who had extra in their harvests. And that is the genesis of places like Kisumu, which in traditional sense is Kisuma. And that Kisuma gave birth to what we today call Kisumu. That it is a place where, communities around the region whose crops had failed would go to their next of kin to share with them whatever extra harvest they had had. So is it scarcity of resources worsened by climate change and drought that has instilled in us this selfishness? Or is it the naked capitalism that countries like Kenya embraced, to the extent that once Julius Kambarage Nyerere, may the God rest his soul in eternal peace, said, Kenya is a man-eat-man society, trying to compare the attitudes that he used to see in his own country and that he instilled in his fellow citizens, but which, as a country, we have failed to embrace, more than 50 years into independence. So I do not know what your comments would be, even among the other, contemporaries. One would imagine that Christianity would instill these values how come that even as churches grow, as crusades go late into the night, there is a parallel line of killings and greed that is being perpetrated even on the pulpit itself. What happened to these values that African heritage claims to be founded on? Christianity claims to have come to continue the same thing, yet every day we continue to go miles and miles apart. Thank you.
Thank you, Suba. Thank you for your contribution. Any other question before we? Are we okay there? It's not working.
Thank you, Kazungu, and your panel over there. I think sitting here listening to your panel, I've really gotten a lot of enlightenment in this subject of discussion that we're having today. I'm disturbed, and this is, I think, goes back to what was shared in the morning by the CEO of Uraia, that somebody is suing an oath to be able to protect life, like what you see, and the Mzee there gave the example of the collapsing buildings, that people are supposed to be doing things the right way and not doing that. And these are people who are educated. So you wonder whether education is helping us or, it's what's happening in that manner. So I think that's been tied with what Reverend Linda just shared, the role of education. Of course, on the other hand, the good book says that you train our young people in the way they should go, the assurance that when they grow up, they won't depart from that. But now, I think the challenge comes then, how come then these people be taught the way they're supposed to go, turn back and now go do the opposite? So that dichotomy, what happens? Where did the rain start beating us? That's a question I do have. Because I remember back, and I think Subas alluded to that before, in the African society, we used to have this, cohesiveness, caring for one another, doing good to your neighbor. But now that's not the case right now. So what's happening? How do we then rediscover that? I think the question you're asking. And then going forward, I think the role of the family, the role of the school system, in imparting this value system. I was asking myself in the morning, so can you be able to teach values or values taught or values are imparted? So the question then, what do we do? And I think, this is a very good discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Your name, please?
Oh, Zach Gaia from CSO Network, Kisumu.
Thank you. Any other question? Yes, Masese. Who cries? Why do we cry? Why do we sing at funerals? That's what you say.
Well, a quick comment. There's a conversation that somehow started in the morning about living by example. And I think Ed Okara, listening to him when he challenged us, do we need to teach the voter? And who between the voter and the professional needs to be taught? So I felt that we appear to be saying that education has failed and we need to fix it. And I think if education has failed, religion has failed even more. And I think if there's a place where raw greed is exercised, it's in the church. Madam, when I say this, I speak as a Christian. That's why I'm called Paul. So, what then are we saying? How do we live by example? Who are our role models? Is it the teacher? Someone may have said no without saying it. Is it the priest? I don't think. Do we create new role models? Is that the crossroads we are talking about? So, Ojicho, you gave a very elaborate framework. I got it that your argument is the framework for who to exist. So where is the missing link?
Thank you, Masese. Another gentleman. Can we get a question from a lady or comment from a lady, please, before we go to the next gentleman? Thank you. Thank you, two ladies.
Thank you. My name is Esther Monge from Coalition for Peace and Gender Champions. My question goes to Reverend. I wanted to clearly understand, maybe you can explain to us, why the church mostly is not active, engaging in active citizenship. I'm saying this looking at the people whose rights are always violated. Most of them are hiding. We are Christians, would like to pray about this. Maybe we don't want to pursue justice into it. So maybe what do you think would be is happening? And why is it that Christians, most of them are victims, and well knowing your rights, you just choose to let it pass by, even when your rights are being violated by the church? I'm saying this because a Christian, the son had been denied the right to register for national examinations by a church-owned institution, and she had just kept quiet, saying it is okay, until 2 weeks ago when the child was registered by force, by fire. So for her, she was just comfortable that the son will miss the exams and it will just happen like that. So I'm wondering, why is it that Christians are not actively engaged in matters that relate to their open rights? Thank you.
Thank you. The lady behind you, and then the final question from the gentleman.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Ruth Karimi from Kirinyaga County. I wanted to comment about the issue of churches and Utu. So a lot of things were happening just before the elections in August. And the character of the church came out so openly. When we talk about Utu and this concept of national values, we expect our churches to be at the forefront in preaching cohesion, preaching unity, healing hearts, and calming down emotions. But that did not come out, especially before elections. Churches took sides, they became partisan, they were even using the pulpit to propagate hate speech, allowing politicians to do all manner of things, and people are hurting up to date because of what was happening. So I was thinking the only savior we have is the civil society. We are the ones who are going to start this journey of preaching cohesion and advancing this concept of Utu. That's my take. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ruth. There was one final hand here. Yes.
Yeah, thank you for the conversation. I'm Fred Wanyonyi from Bungoma County, an organization called the REDO, Rural Empowerment Development Organization. Actually, we are told Bungoma is the county where election was won and also lost. So, yeah, so I'm here to talk about the issue. I've seen my friends reacting on the issue to do with the church. But I also belong to different, of course I am an evangelist and I belong to various national platform of bishops and different faith-based or religious leaders. I've seen them argue. Of course they've taken sides. Of course we expected them to take sides because they are also citizens. But as CSOs, we've said as CSOs we need to give direction. But towards election, we've also seen I can say our big brothers, CSO, national CSOs, taking sides even on national media. So our key question is, where do we stand as CSOs, especially those working directly with the rural communities? Because mostly, I usually say that those people who belong to upper class, we usually go at our village when those rural population or citizens have already shortlisted those candidates for us, and we are left with no option but just to choose any leader. Maybe, I don't know, maybe they bribed their way out or so. So where are we supposed to start doing voter education? I'm aware that for the little time I've been in civil society, towards the election, we usually see a lot of activities and a lot of funding coming down there. Does it mean that we are also competing with politicians maybe? Yeah, as politicians, are they spreading hate speech? Are we only reacting on whatever politicians are doing? Are we always reacting on whatever they are doing? Another speaker said during morning session on GMOs, for now we are quiet, we are not giving the public to a man like him. And I was surprised none of those men who were there wanted their daughter to get married to a man with their character. Kindly let us also evaluate ourselves as we talk about Utu. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Back to our panelists. I'll give each of our panelists a maximum of 3 minutes to just respond to the questions and give closing remarks. I think most of the questions are around where did we lose it? Where did we lose our humanness? Was it because of lack of resources? Was it because of capitalism? Was it because of the education? Has the church played a role? I'll leave you to respond to that.
My My brother will respond on the issue of resources. Mr. Suba, my brother is going to assist me to respond to the issue. Let me just very quickly respond to the other question of education. Now here, I'll be very clear. Slightly controversial, but very, very clear. Question is, at what point, Masese, did we get it wrong on our education policy? I think that's the question. Because I said that education is the basis, and educating our people to be responsible citizens, not just the voter, is the challenge. Not just the voter. So if all the educated, now I want to put it exactly where, in my view, we got it wrong. We got it wrong in 1907. I think we have got a commission now, which is going on, which is being chaired by, I don't know who's chairing the current commission. From 1907 to this commission, this might be the 13th commission on education on Kenya. Yes, I mean, you can go and check, some of you can do your research, but it will be, there will be one in 1907, 1927, all the way to this one. And all those education commissions respond to the decision we took in 1907 and refine it, but don't change it. Don't change it at all. Why? Because this is what happened. In 1907, the challenge was, at that time, which faced him and the company, because the company was going to be broke. How do we make this place economically viable? Very genuine question. By his board of the slave. Debating that question, if you remember, you want to check it. I think most of you know. One was a man called Washington T. Booker. Okay? You remember him. The other one was William Du Bois of Kenyatta. Yeah. T. Booker said no. Listen, you know, it's also their first thing is to earn a living, free slaves, on the skills they can use to be employed in the farm. Percy was Professor Fraser, Johnson Fraser. He was teaching in Bombay. He came here and he told Percy, listen, the native African and the black Negro are the same, basically the same. And he was not wrong, basically that's what he thought. So give these Africans in Kenya only the education that they will need to serve, to support this. In other words, in short, teach them education for the market.
He has been here for long, from 1997, and he has seen Kenya move amid a few steps back and forward. From there, we went to Mr. Eric Njoroge, who helped us. He's from the Uraia Trust. He helped us launch the National Civic Competence Index 2021. And this document, as he said, is critical. The other day, we were trying to develop a proposal somewhere for the EU. And one of the most difficult things that I found in that exercise is that we have very few baseline studies. Because anyway, when you try to develop some of those documents, even in your own fundraising effort, you will be asked about the questions of your baseline. So you are saying citizens are not informed about national values, or the constitution, or the question of the various levels of government oriented. So what is your baseline? I think this specific report lays the foundation for use in some of your work, because the baselines are very minimal. Those which are there are shaky, and development of such reports going forward becomes critical, not only for Uraia partners, but for all of you and Kenyans in general. I think this is an area of scarcity, as noted and experienced recently by myself and my team. We came now to session 2, and we had quite a number of people, including Elder Paddy Onyango of the Kenya National Integrity Alliance. And I think some of the key issues that he came up with is that Utu is not about the many things that people might think about, but it starts on the very, very basics of being sensitive of circumstances of others. And that Utu is lived, practiced, felt, and maybe not necessarily schooled. Those are some of the things he observed. The other thing that he observed in his presentation is the need to change power relations. And he particularly raised the issue with the use of... to the guest speaker was Josiah Musiri, the Secretary to the National Cohesion and Values. And he emphasized on the questions of Article 10. And he emphasized that also Utu is significant to the extent that it determines how citizens relate with each other, and more so in relation to how the citizens relate to the government. We came to the questions of accountability and integrity in the electoral process, and the moderator was Franklin Kwaja, as the AD for CMD. And here, also there are some key words that came in, and one of... So I think that's on the part of accountability and integrity in the electoral process. And then we headed to the last session with the issue here. Here we had serious brains from our elder here, where some people were wondering where he comes from. My sister was asking me where this man with all this knowledge comes from. I told him I don't know. But you create a session with him after we are through to get to know each other. He has beaten you. So don't say that all the people have waenda nyumbani. Some of them are needed. As you can see, my sister. Now, some of the key words here that came out of this session is the question of identity. I think he started with the question of identity and Utu. He was also keen on the question of education and Utu. And one of the observations here he made is that keen on the question of education and Utu. And one of the observations here he made is that was in the US and the education for the market. In the colonies, not only in Kenya, in the colonies from India to all the colonies had that problem. But it's good he reminded us that we need to think. We have now a task force on education, CBC. Maybe when we are giving some of our, they will come to you. Maybe this is something that we need to think about as we contribute to the task force that is already ongoing in the country. From Mr. Okara, there was Mr. Jijo from IDF. Jijo was very particular. His approach to Utu was the question of human rights as the driver of this Utu. And then he deliberately created a link between the Kenyan economic blueprint as the Vision 2030, and he also tried to link the connection to the Universal Sustainable Development Goals very, very keenly. So don't say that people, this is the debate about linking the Vision 2030 and the question of SDGs, or the Sustainable Development Goals. It's not an urban thing. This man has come all the way from Migori, and you can see he's linking the Migori problems to the national blueprint. He's also linking it to the global issues. So Migori has gone global now. So, isi mambo ya watu wa town, that's Homa Bay for you. So that's very serious, Mr. Ojijo. The Reverend Dr. Linda Uchora has been attacked a bit, but she has been very, very good. She was good in trying to put the issues raised into context, that the church is you, and not us against them. Yeah? You are the same people who go to those churches, the same people who go to those mosques, and therefore trying to run away from the church and pointing the church was not encouraged. So I think the key word here is the question of the corrective values as looked at from the institutional aspect, and the individual values as rested in families, where values are first inculcated before we take the product to the other parts or outside to meet other Kenyans. Thank you so much, and I don't know if Linda, you have anything to say?
Olivia.
Olivia.
Olivia. Ache Atoma. Yes, I have something to say as we close. Thank you so much. I would like to take over from you.
Thank you. That's a summary of the day. In brief, taking the key issues coming out in a nutshell. Thank you so much for attending, and welcome. Tomorrow, let's continue with the debate. It will be more lively and more interesting on other topical issues that affect our country. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm humbly and politely taking over from you so that we can save on time and end this program. Thank you so much for your summary of the day's happening, and we appreciate. Finally, I would like to end the day's conference. The day was amazing, I believe, and we have picked important words from every speaker. And thank you so much for everyone who participated today. Allow me to just request the following to please pass by the registration desk as you leave. Abdia Hassan, Peter Rono, George Collins, Titus Kuria, Hilary Omondi, Mary Pitai, Caroline Jue, Maranga N, Esther Mwangi, Grace Okelo, Josephine Kasawani, Masi Mwakio, Gloria Ochola, Zach Gaya, Isabella Kidede, and Regina Wambui. Kindly pass by the registration desk as you leave. And then I would like to just bring to our attention that today we started a bit late. So tomorrow I would request us to be here on time. We are starting at exactly 9. So registration will be between 8:30 and 9. Try and be here at that time so that we start together and just have the flow and an interesting program the whole day. Finally, I would request us to stand up so that I lead us in a word of prayer. As we close, I will invite you for a cup of tea. We will pray, go for tea, do some socialization and know one another, and plan for tomorrow. Let's bow our heads for a word of prayer. Father, in the mighty name of Jesus Christ, we come before you this evening. Thank you because you have been with us throughout the day. You have led us through the program. Steps in the direction that you have put for us. We glorify you and we thank you because of the amazing leading that you have given us today. As we leave and go home, I pray for protection. I pray that everyone may be covered by your blood, and the wisdom that you have given us may continue flowing, O God. Thank you and be blessed in our midst today. We pray this, believing and trusting in Jesus' mighty name. Amen. Thank you. You are released.